All right, so like I said, good morning, everyone. Appreciate you all joining us for our FTC Safeguards Compliance for Dealerships webinar. Appreciate you all being here. I am Taylor Clark, Director of Marketing at In-Telecom. I'll be your host. We've got a pretty informative session lined up for y'all today. Excited for y'all to hear what we've got for you. Before we dive in, I want to introduce our presenters. First, we have Sean Torres. He's the CEO and founder of In-Telecom. He's been in the industry since 2009, helping businesses with everything from telecommunications to cybersecurity, video surveillance, across the board. We also have Trace Hester with us, who's Director of Business Operations at In-Telecom and has been working in compliance in the healthcare industry for the better part of the last decade. So without further ado, we'll get this thing rolling. I'll pass things off to Sean Torres.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining today. Excited to give you all some education on safeguard compliance, and hopefully you can take something away from this today that you can apply back to your dealership that'll help make things a little easier than what it can be from a compliance standpoint. So let me get some control here. Here we go. So my name is Sean Torres. I'm the CEO and co-founder of In-Telecom. I've been doing this now since 2009. We've grown this organization at a pretty extensive amount over the past 14 years, supporting clients today in about 26 states and several lines of different service lines, from managed IT services to managed VoIP to access control and managed physical and cyber security. So, the organization has got a great staff today. We've won several awards, Inc. 5000 for the past 3 years in a row, top workplaces from our employees that voted us that, as well as from CRN just recently as a top 500 MSP within the US. So it's been nice to see the company evolve. Obviously, my leadership, but really it's been the people within this organization that have done the things that we've needed it to do to get it where it needs to go. Kind of get into how we got involved in the safeguard compliance. We manage some auto dealerships and some RV dealerships today across the US. And as we started looking at how could we help our client base and get them, when the FTC came out with this rule last year, we were looking at this from a cyber perspective and already working on cyber efforts for our current base at the time. It just made a bunch of sense for us to start, adapting to what changes were happening in the industry to where we could evolve and help our client base kind of get into a place that they felt confident that they could do what that they needed to do. It's really what's evolved this organization and what it is today. Are the customers requesting us to help them and provide solutions as a technology partner? And that's really kind of where we got involved. To make sure that we could help them get them into compliance. There's been a ton of back and forth on what does this look like. There's some gray areas. We've had extensive conversations with NADA, FTC attorneys, as well as our current client base to truly understand what this looks like to where we could get them into compliance. They've extended this now to a June 9th deadline, and there's a lot of work to do. And I believe that we've come up with a good game plan for our client base to be able to help them in many different ways. But really, our main goal is to not only just get a company into compliance, but is also protect them with business continuity to where they can continue operating and making money continuously. Cyber crimes today can be pretty dramatic for an organization. I just read an article recently that was saying that the average ransomware attack can cost an organization upwards of about $9.4 million. And obviously, as my perspective as a CEO and owner of an organization, I realize how important it is to have less business impacts. And as a CEO, it's my job to mitigate risk and understand what that risk looks like. So I know that some of this is new to folks that are learning about it. I do think that it's very important to pay attention and understand what those risks look like. I recently spoke at a conference and was able to understand. I heard stories about class action lawsuits. So it's not about just downtime for your organization and the ability to process transactions. Also looking at the economical impact of an attorney finding out what happened and then approaching your client base and then creating a class action lawsuit that you would have to then go mitigate. And again, that can cost, hundreds, if not millions of dollars, depending on the size and scale of your company. So again, it's our objective today to give you enough information to show you what it looks like. What does it really mean to get into compliance? I think Trace and his background in compliance and understanding from a healthcare perspective with HIPAA and understanding all of the strenuous guidelines there, this one's actually a little easier, but it is very important to understand what that looks like. As we've been discussing in the market and having conversations with our client base and prospects, I think there's a lot of confusion on what does compliance mean, and what are all the aspects that go into it. There are other components of this as an organization that you will have to do to make sure that you're doing the things necessary. So I think it will be some operational changes that organizations are going to have to make and understand what that looks like. I think we've put together a great plan to help execute and help understand from a guidance perspective, as well as a entry level into some form of compliance from a cybersecurity perspective, as well as full blown helping you build your own compliance plan, because that's going to be the best method to do this, is to build your own internal processes to get there. So, I'm going to hand this over to Trace Hester here now. Again, you all need to be in compliance by June 9th. There's some steps that you can get started, and I think Trace will be able to give you a good guidance and understanding of what that looks like, and give you some a place to just start and to start thinking about it. This is serious. This is important. And I would, again, start working today if you have not. And hopefully today we can give you some guidance and get you at least started on where you need to go. So I'm going to hand this over to Trace now. So take it away, Trace.
Yeah, appreciate it. Look, it's good to be here. It's good to be talking about it. I've been involved in it for, like Taylor said, about 10 years. And the good news is this is really similar to HIPAA. So we're very familiar with the way this works and what's required. The bad news is it's better funded. So as far as we understand it, the FTC has more auditors. They're training them right now. So just to kind of make you aware of where it stands, when June 9th gets here, there's a lot of things that are considered annual. So there are some things you have to check off before we get to June 9th, and I'll walk you through those. And, we've seen this before. We've done this before. We have a lot of the pieces. We're still being educated ourselves. We're constantly learning as these things change. It's an ongoing process, but I'm confident that we've been able to dig into these controls from the IT side. And a couple of things to keep in mind as we do this is there's two pieces to this as a financial institution, which you are now, according to the FTC. And one of those things to consider is that there's an operational documentation process piece, and then there's the IT and security piece. And we'll get into a little bit of both of those. We have the experience on staff to help guide you with even the stuff that's non-technical. We're here as a partner to help, to educate. We're happy to do that. Please put your questions in as we go. I'm happy to answer them. If we can't get to everything, we'll obviously respond and make sure we get your questions answered. We're happy to do a gap assessment for you. There's a banner at the top if you want to go ahead and get that scheduled. We'll sit with you. We'll help you understand where your gaps are and how to fix those. The other thing to consider is this applies to all organizations that are dealerships, no matter how small, all the way up to very large organizations, and how you apply these controls depends on your size. So these do comply to everyone, or apply to everyone, excuse me, but the way it applies to your organization is based on size. So, if you're doing 100 deals a week, you can't just slap some antivirus on a computer, lock the door, and call it good. The FTC is going to make sure you're doing what you're capable of doing at that size. And we can offer guidance there as well, depending on how many rooftops you have, how many endpoints you have, So the gap assessment, there is also a discovery session to help us understand your organization and give you some good feedback. So just some things to keep in mind as we go through here today. So basically what's required is you have to have an information security program now. It has to be documented. That's where organizations like us can come in and help you. We at In-Telecom, we have an information security program, which we can apply to your organization. And the objective is simple. You have to protect that information. You have to protect your consumers' private information. And that's just a fancy way of saying all that. Every control in the safeguards requirement is designed to do just that, all the way down to lock and key and the vendors you're using. So that's sort of the overarching goal of the program of the FTC safeguards, is to say, hey, you have to protect this customer information. You have to protect their financial data. And you have to have a security program and policies in place and things in place in order to do that. So everything revolves around that idea. Today, we're going to spend most of our time talking about the information security program. That's what we at In-Telecom do. That's the piece of this we can solve for you and with you. That's where most of our knowledge is, in the information security program piece. But we do have experience on the policy side as well, what that looks like, what these procedures are supposed to do. We have people on staff like myself that can help with those policies, right? That can help get you there, even though it's the non-technical piece. And basically what I'd like to do today, what I hope to do today, is educate you on sort of the 9 aspects that are required at a high level. There's about 50 controls related to the information security side at the FTC. Obviously, we're not going to get into all 50 controls and get into those specifics. It takes a lot of time to do that. That's part of the gap assessment. If you'd like to sit in and do one of those with us, we can get more granular with the controls and what you have as an organization. But again, as we're going through these, if you have any questions, please put those in. If it's something we can answer on the fly, I'll do that. If we need to wait till the end, I'll do that as well. So don't be shy. So to get us started here, the main thing you have to do as an organization is designate who your compliance officer is going to be. It's number one for a reason. You can't really do anything else until you've made someone responsible for it. Your security provider, like ITC, we can be your qualified individual on the security side, right? There's 2 sections. You basically have a compliance officer and a security officer. I operated as a security officer for a very long time, but when we were a smaller organization, I was both. So you can have one person be both. If you're a smaller organization, if you're a larger organization, you're going to have 2. That's where we can come in as the security officer and we can operate. You'll still need to designate someone to oversee us, to oversee your security provider. So whether they're in-house, they're a W-2 employee of your organization, or they're one of your vendors, you still have to designate someone to be responsible for the entire program. They're responsible for making sure organizations like us, your vendors, are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then they're also responsible for reporting that back to your leadership and making sure the leadership is abreast of all the information, the way things change, so that you can make decisions based on risk. And that's where we come in and we can guide you. We can help you with those things. We can help you make those decisions, and we have to have someone to work with. So the FTC says, hey, each organization has to have someone that is the compliance officer. They're a named person that we can reference and work with internally. So no matter what, you have to have a person. This person has to have authority to act. So they need to be able to come in, understand the entire application stack. They have to be able to administrate some of your systems. They have to know who's responsible for what, policy and procedure. So this really needs to be someone who is heavily involved in the day-to-day of the organization, who has access to the people and the processes of the organization, that can work with your vendors, and then has the authority to go back to the board or the leadership at your organization and present the information. So keep that in mind as well. When you designate a compliance officer, it really needs to be someone who can act autonomously and with authority in that role, and that they have to report back, and that person has to be named. They have to have somebody in leadership over them in your organization that they report to. So that's something that you actually need to name 2 people, your officers as well as whoever's sitting on top of them, to oversee what they're doing. So that's all that control says. Make sure you have that person. And again, we can help you with that. If you need to know where that person should live in your organization and the scope, again, we can make recommendations on that after we do a gap assessment and sit and things like that. The second piece here, which is really the most involved piece from your organization, is a risk assessment, a detailed risk assessment. Larger organizations are going to bring in third parties to do this. Us as a security provider, what we can do is provide everything you need in order to do that risk assessment. Your cybersecurity vendor is going to give you all the reports. Here's your risks. Here's the things you need to be doing. They're going to provide that to that named compliance officer. And then once a year, you've got to sit down and look at that. You've got to say, hey, okay, we understand our risks. Maybe we want to accept some of them, right? Maybe it costs too much to do this thing, but we still have to acknowledge that that's there. We still have to acknowledge that, hey, this is a risk to our organization, but we're signing off on it. Or we're going to make a plan to remediate that risk. That's not something a vendor can do for you. Your risk tolerance is going to be different based on your organization, based on your number of rooftops, based on what you have in place today. How much downtime can you take? What really is a risk for your organization may not be a risk for another organization, but we can give you all the tools and data and information you need as a security provider, or your security provider can do that so that you can sit down and have a thorough risk assessment. And that's what the FTC is saying in this group of controls, right? You have to sit down, review risks, and then assess whether or not they need to be remediated, or you're willing to accept those risks. They can be ongoing. We need to adjust the information security plan based on the risk assessment. So if you're engaging a third party like ourselves, who are going to be your security provider, that after that risk assessment is when you would come back to us via that compliance officer and say, hey, we have these risks. We want to adjust our plan. We want to make sure we're doing this. And we come in and we do that for you, right? So we take your risk assessment, what you think is possible for your organization, and we help you manage that. And we help come in and tailor the plan to you. A lot of this stuff is pretty cookie cutter. It's pretty clear you got to be doing A, B, and C, but some things will evolve with your organization and some things are gray. And that's where the size, the scope of your organization comes in, and we can help you navigate those sorts of things. So when you're choosing a security vendor, when you're deciding if you should bring this stuff in-house, that's some things to keep in mind, right? The risk assessment, as you get larger, the FTC is going to say, hey, maybe you need to bring in a third party because you need some checks and balances. If you're smaller, you can probably do some of that in-house. And that's where we can guide you with the scope of your organization. Again, this is all based on scope. You have to do it, but how you do it is going to be based on the size of your organization. The third piece here is sort of the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. So you have your risk assessment, you have your person. So what do you do? What's the whole point, right? And that is protecting customer information, putting safeguards in place. That's policy and procedure and training and all kinds of things, right? We have tons of controls. Like I said, there's about 50 controls here, and it's all designed to protect patient data. How are we handling mobile devices? Do we allow mobile devices, inside our secure areas? How are we securing those areas? The physical security, who has access to those areas? How are we disposing of customer information? If we're printing out credit applications, you've got to dispose of those, and not only dispose of those, but you have to prove that you dispose. So maybe you bring in somebody like Shred It, and you have shred bins, and they come in and they shred your stuff. Maybe you put a process in place that says, hey, we're not going to do any paper. We're going to do it all digital. Well, that's where a security and an IT provider comes in, right? We can help you make sure that's secured on the endpoint. So there's a lot of discovery here. There's a lot of changing your process and procedure here when you're reviewing what you're doing. A lot of times you may be doing it right, but you have to document it, right? Oh, hey, we're doing all of those things. We have access control. Okay, cool. Well, we need to sit down and write those things out and make sure that it's published to your staff and that they sign off on it so that the organization has plausible deniability, right? If we put badge access in, you as an organization have done everything you can do. And then if your employee props open the door, well, now if the FTC comes in that day and they visit and they say, hey, we're here to help, that's what they're going to say. Hey, I'm from the FTC. I'm here to help. And they're going to walk around and that door's propped open. Well, you can say, hey, there's a badge. You have a 10-day window to go back to the FTC. Say, no. We as an organization did everything and our employees were trained and signed off on it. Well, now you're not on the hook anymore, right? So those are the things. You're not going to mitigate every single thing. You're not going to force your employees into compliance. But what you can do is build policies and procedures that are guidelines for your employees, and they sign off and they train every year and say, hey, we understand what we're supposed to do. That way, if someone takes a picture of a credit application, they were trained not to do that. And you have the proof there. So that's what a lot of this is designed to do, right? Nobody's going to be 100%, but we need to mitigate risk to the best of our ability, and we need to document it and train our employees. So that's where the safeguards come into play. We take the risk assessment, we identify what we've got to do, and then we work through it. And the FTC is not unreasonable, right? They understand that even by the deadline, you're going to have things that you're finding and remediating. And that's the important part. A lot of these controls are annual. So, hey, I know we've only got 2 months. It's not going to be perfect in 2 months. But what we can do is we can do some of those things. We can do these risk assessments and say, hey, we've identified these. We've got the policy, and we're actively engaging, and we're going to have our annual stuff done before 2023 is over. That's enough. On a lot of these controls, that's enough. As long as you are remediating, you're doing these things, and you have the annual stuff scheduled. So yes, there are some things we have to have done by the deadline, but as long as we're engaged before the deadline and we have a plan and we are remediating, in most cases, you're going to be okay. But the FTC is going to come in. They're going to find eventually that they're going to hit sites. They're going to knock on the door. And a lot of what you can do is just train your employees on what to do. Hey, sit them down. Do not let them walk around, right? Make sure they have a cup of coffee, and we're going to call the compliance officer, right? You have every right to do that. That's another reason you name your compliance officer. Let's say you have 10 sites. Your compliance officer obviously cannot be at all 10 sites. But what your employees can do is sit that FTC auditor down, get them on the phone, and the compliance officer has additional training, and they know, oh, you know what? I'm allowed to reschedule with the FTC. Hey, I'm not on that site today. I'm happy to be there when I can be there, and you can reschedule. So you definitely don't want them just walking around without your compliance officer. Those are the things we can help guide you on. Obviously, as your security and your IT provider, for your organization, we can't do a lot of those things, but we can absolutely help you build those documents and understand what your place is with regards to FTC and the safeguard policy compliance documents. So moving on here, I know we've got to stay high level. Number 4 just says we've got to test those things. So number 3, we're going to build them. Number 4, we're going to test them, and we're going to test them annually, and we're going to do our risk assessments. We're going to adjust when we need to adjust, and then we're going to keep on. So once you're in maintenance mode, you're just going to conduct your test. You're going to make sure your people are being trained. You're going to monitor your information systems. That's where we come in. That's where a security provider comes in. We're giving you those reports. We have those reports. We have all of these what are called audit artifacts. So when the FTC comes in and says, hey, are you doing this? You call us and we provide them, right? Your security provider says, hey, oh, yep, here's our patch statements. Here's our antivirus statements. Here's our encryption statements. All of those things that you need for your organization, you can provide, and that we're continuously testing and monitoring, or at least if your security provider is doing what they should be doing, then this part's handled, right? Everything's running on the endpoints. Everything, that stuff should happen most of the time without you having to be involved, unless you're doing it in-house, right? Then your IT staff should be doing that. And again, we can take you through what that looks like. But number 4 just says, hey, after you've built your plan, you got to test it. You got to make sure these things are being done. Number 5, train your staff. It's that simple. They've got to have security awareness training. They've got to be up to date on your policies and procedures. If you have management and leadership staff, there's policies and procedures just for them. So they have to know what those policies are. That way they can enforce them. There has to be teeth on those policies as well. And the staff has to know, because the goal here is to say, hey, we as an organization have done everything. And if we catch somebody doing it 3 times, they have to go. And it's that simple, right? We've trained them. We've given them every opportunity to get in line, and we can prove it, right? So it's not just, hey, take this paper test and sign off on it. It's, we need to prove that, hey, this person failed their phishing simulation. They were remediated. They were trained. A lot of that can be automated. Again, if your security provider is doing what they should, you've got training programs in place, sends them an email when they onboard, they take the training, it's logged that they took the training and passed. Every year we send out training. That's done. So those kinds of things don't have to get in the way very much. It can be part of your onboarding process. It can be part of your annual review process, but they do have to be trained, and they do have to have access to these policies that we're going to hold them to. Number 6 is your service providers. Folks like us, folks like In-Telecom. are the easy ones, right? You know, hey, I have an IT provider. Obviously, they count, right? But what throws a lot of organizations, and what was really eye-opening to me in the healthcare industry, is this also includes things like your sanitation staff, right? Your janitors, people coming in to clean. If they have access to your building, especially if they have access without you being there, they fall under these guidelines as well. You need to have documentation in place with these folks. That way they understand that when they're on site, they're responsible for these as well. That way you as an organization can say, hey, I've signed a BAA. It's called a business associate agreement in the healthcare industry. And any lawyer can write up a standard BAA. These aren't really crazy documents, but basically you have to assess your vendors and say, hey, are they doing these things? And then as part of your risk assessment, you have to say, hey, I have a vendor that won't respond, that won't do anything. You have to say, hey, should I even be using this vendor? So we as vendors are responsible for pieces of this as well. And you as an organization are responsible for making sure your vendors are where they should be. Can they provide the documentation I need? Are they doing the things I need? Are they willing to sign a BAA? If we have to go on site and we have to, let's say we're your IT provider and we have access to your server room, maybe you want to give us that access 24/7, right? So we can get there and help with any outages. We have to be under these safeguard rules. We have to sign a BAA with you that says when we're on site, we're going to protect your customer information as well. That we understand that we're not going to, go pull paper out of the shred bin and things like that. It seems simple, but the fact that someone's there cleaning the building at 5 a.m. and there's no one in the building, they can see anything that's out on the desk. That's why the FTC drops these auditors in unannounced. Who's got a credit application sitting on the desk? Who's got a computer screen that's not locked and I can just snap a quick picture of a credit application? Is my sales guy taking a text message of the credit application just in case he wanted to? You can't do those things. You have to have applications and stuff that are protecting the data, and so do your vendors. So that's something to keep in mind. The FTC wants to make sure you understand that it's not just you, it's also the people servicing you and handling your IT information as well as your physical information. Things like if you're FedExing a deal, right? We've seen instances where people say, oh yeah, we'll do a deal and we FedEx it to the other office. Well, you can't do that anymore, right? Because FedEx is not going to sign a BAA with you. FedEx is huge. They're just going to take it like a birthday card and they're going to send it to your other office, but it hasn't been in your control the whole time. So the FTC is going to see that and go, nope, FedEx is not a vendor. So you have to figure out a way to either transport that yourself or do it digitally, right? The way they word it is it has to be in your constant care. And so if you have vendors, they have to sign the appropriate paperwork that says, we care for it for you. It's under your constant care when you sign those appropriate things with vendors. So this is a big one. This is one that throws a lot of organizations, not just in safeguards, but in healthcare as well, with PCI compliance and those other things. Your vendors are on the hook as well. And so as part of your risk assessment, you've got to decide, is your vendor doing the right thing? And then if they're not, should they be your vendor? And again, during the gap assessments, we can help you identify those things. All right, moving pretty quick. Keep everything up to date. This goes with one of the other controls where you've got to maintain, right? You got to monitor, keeping things up to date. Hey, we added a new location. Okay, well, we got to go in, we got to do the policy procedure stuff for that location. Hey, we're going to update our CRM. We're going to update our point of sale. We're going to change point of sale providers. These are huge pieces of your organization. And when those things change, they have to go through what's called change management, and you have to update your security program appropriately. And you have to upgrade your other policies and procedures might change as your organization grows and evolves over time. You have to make sure that your policies, your information security program are up to date, that they're current, right? You can't say, oh, we reviewed it 4 years ago and that's good enough. No, the FTC is going to come in and say, no, you have to look at it every year. Obviously, some things have changed. Obviously, some things have updated. So really, it's not as complicated as it seems, right? Build it, test it, keep it up to date. That's really the short version of all of this so far. Number 8, this is where a security provider comes in, or if you're doing cybersecurity in-house, incident response plan. How would you respond to let's say you've done everything right, you've got all the policies and procedures in place, you're going to get breached anyway. The FTC is never going to believe that someone hadn't sent a rogue email or that you've never been phished, or that you never mishandled data. It's going to happen, right? It's actually a red flag if the FTC asks you and you say, oh no, we've never had an incident. You have had an incident. They know you have at any size. The question is, how do you self-report on that incident? How do you track it? How do you respond to it? You can say, hey, this is what we did. We remediated. This was our incident. This is what happened. We notified the customer and we closed the book. Cool. That's perfect, right? So your incident response plan is basically a written version of that. When something happens, this is how we respond to it. If we have a cyber incident, someone got phished, that's where we have an incident response plan for our clients. So, hey, when you get phished, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to operate under your playbook, right? And we can tailor that. Do you want us to shut the account down? Do you not want us to shut the account down? How do you want to operate, your incident response plan? Again, 85% of it's going to be pretty cookie cutter, but some of those things are going to be up to the size and scope of your organization. Self-reporting is huge. You have to have a way to document, making sure your managers are training. Hey, caught somebody with a cell phone on the floor, reviewed what they had in their photos, making sure they didn't have any data, wrote them up, retrained them, closed the book. Right? Those are the kinds of things you have to be doing, and your response plan is part of that. We responded to a potential breach. Hey, we noticed someone didn't lock the door last night. Okay, so we went back and we reviewed the camera footage. That's all you got to say. We reviewed it, didn't find anything out of the ordinary, and we closed the book, right? Those types of things. How are you responding? The really detailed cybersecurity response plan can be handled by a service provider such as ourselves. So that's one of those things that a good vendor can take off your plate, at least for the most part, and then consult with you on the best way to implement that. And then the last one we have for today, I know compliance isn't fun, right? I know no one likes doing this. There's a lot of rules. We're trying to make it as simple as possible for our partners and for people in the industry. We just want you to know what to expect. There's a different level of work for everyone, but basically at the end of the day, whether someone like us is your compliance officer or you have internal compliance officer, board of directors, leadership at the company just has to be kept in the loop. The FTC says, hey, you're doing all these things and that's great, but you have to report these to leadership. That way they have everything they need to make informed decisions around protecting customer data, right? And some of that can be automated. Hey, here's your reports. You're going to get them monthly from your vendors, and you can review them and sign off on them. And then the compliance officer is just going to go once a year, and we're going to kind of look at it as part of the risk assessment. You can kind of combine a lot of these, right? You can say, hey, we're going to do our risk assessment. We're going to report to qualified individuals at the same time. It's going to be a big party. We're going to get some pizza, and we're just going to knock it out once a year, and we're going to be done with it. If you have good account managers on your vendor side, they're going to be keeping you up to date. The risk assessment, management and control decisions, what's changed? Do we need to update anything? What are our risks this year as opposed to last year? What are the problems we had? What are the types of incidents we had? You've got to at least be doing that annually. And that's not just on the information security piece, but it's also the policy, procedure, operational piece as well. So it all comes together once a year where you do these annual assessments, you do the annual reviews. It also helps you keep your stuff up to date, right? You're able to really do this in scope as sort of one big annual thing if you want to. Now, obviously, if you're a larger organization, you probably want to do something biannual or quarterly because there's just a lot more to it. But if you're a smaller organization, once a year, knock it out. And then if your vendors are doing what they should be doing, it's all good. You take a look at it, everything looks good. You sign off on the policy. Hey, we reviewed it. Nothing has changed this year, and we move on. So it's that simple, right? We're going to build policies. We're going to test policies. We're going to report on those policies, and then we're going to make sure we change those policies as we grow. And that's sort of how the annual flow to these compliance requirements go. And again, we're here to help. If you want to sign up for a gap assessment, if you just have questions you want to send to us, obviously, we got some questions coming in on the Q&A mode. When we get to the end here, I'll try to run through those as much as possible. If I don't get to any today, we're going to make sure we have a recording of this, and we're going to write up and respond. I'm happy to do that via voice as well if you'd rather just have a quick chat. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sean. I know we're kind of at the end of the meat and potatoes, and Sean's going to get into how we've solved this for our clients and kind of what we offer, just so you have an idea of what's out there. So thank you.
Thanks, Trace. I appreciate that. Again, I hope that was informative for everybody. We kept it high level. trying to help understand what that looks like. And again, some of this, like Trey said, rolls back to your level of risk that you're willing to accept inside the organization. Just know that the FTC today is basing their fine is $42,000 per rooftop per incident. Now, they haven't really defined what that looks like. I think what that's going to end up being is really based around what you're doing and are you taking it serious with financial data. Look, we've been working in this industry a long time. We've seen the good side of it and we've seen the bad side of it. I will tell you, I think compliance is important, but more than just being in compliance, I would 100% just understand your risk. Again, this is where this dedicated compliance platform comes into play. As part of our service, we're going to provide that for you. We're going to help you identify the risk, help you understand what that looks like. We'd be providing vendor management and guidance there, understanding ongoing training and testing. And obviously from our perspective, as a security company, the nice thing about working with us is we can also do the physical portion as well as the cyber portion. So when it comes down to lock and key, camera, understanding what's under camera, understanding what information is behind locked doors, are your server rooms locked with access control? Again, we do that today for a lot of our dealers. So again, we can give you guidance from the cyber side. We can give you guidance from the physical side, as well as down to on the voice side, where are your voice recordings held? You know, I know a lot of the people in the automotive industry are using call tracking and understanding from a marketing perspective. That's going to all play into this from a vendor standpoint. I can tell you there's some vendors out there that are holding your recordings overseas. I will tell you that's going to be a big no-no depending on what their standards are. And again, it's really going to be up to you to make the decision, is that are you willing to accept the risk or not? And really kind of discussing what that looks like. I think as long as you have a good written plan and an understanding, I think you'll be able to get through some of this. Again, managed cybersecurity, we're going to provide the tools necessary, you know, multi-factor authentication, you know, provide vulnerability and threat detection, having a good MDR solution, as well as a zero trust policy for your existing systems that are there, as well as real-time monitoring. We have our own independent incident response team that's looking at logs, that's understanding what's happening inside your environment on a daily basis. So when your dealerships are open on a Saturday, you know, and conducting business, that stuff still has to be maintained and monitored, as well as if you have an employee that's staying late working a deal, you know, is your internal IT department there able to do that? The biggest risk that we see today with organizations that have internal IT is a lot of them are overworked. They don't have enough bandwidth to maintain just the day-to-day, more or less looking at what's going on behind the scenes. You know, so from our perspective, we've built packages to be able to work with internal IT departments as well as with other IT companies. We don't have to be your IT company in order for us to help you with this. So truly asking the question, what are your IT companies doing? I would understand what their tolerance is, understanding what they're doing internally. Look, if your IT company is not doing internal audits on themselves, what makes you think that they're internally auditing yourself? You know, we do it annually, and then we follow up with that within a 4-month time frame. You know, me as an owner, I can tell you, I don't like spending the money to do it. The last audit we did was $40,000 from an outside company, and we have the staff here that could probably do the audit internally. But again, we want to make sure that we're eating our own dog food and keeping ourselves held accountable to what that looks like. Because obviously, from my perspective, as a technology provider for our clients, that's the last thing that we want to happen, is for something to happen here internally. And so again, we have to follow our own standards and stay on the course to make sure that we're doing that on our own side. You know, again, what we've done is we've built out a package called ITC Compliance. This compliance platform is offering some managed cybersecurity as well. So therefore, we're not just checking the boxes. There are a lot of companies out there that are offering packages today that are checking boxes. What we're doing is we're giving you the dedicated compliance platform portal to have your information held, as well as a way to track if vendors are being assessed as well. We're doing your automated patching on all your machines. So we're giving you a remote management tool that's going to allow you to maintain your environment. So if you have an internal IT staff today, how are they managing and touching the machines? How are they automating patching and making sure that things are staying up to date from a Windows perspective? We've automated this process and have taken the tools that we've used at scale and are providing this to you as the organization to be able to maintain that. So I want to understand what that looks like and ask your IT vendor, how are you doing this? Because if they tell you that they're doing it manual, I will tell you, you really can't do this manual and maintain this and stay into compliance. We see reports on a regular basis when we take over it as an MSP that we have companies that are behind 55 and 75 patch updates, and it's very common. Your computer's still going to work, everything's still going to function. You're just not going to be secure as you should be per the standards of Microsoft. It's super important to get there and to start maintaining that. We're going to be able to provide those reports to you to help you understand what that looks like. We're going to give you endpoint detection and response. So we're going to give you an MDR solution that's going to be on the machine, actively looking for threats and doing that. Again, the days of just having a good old antivirus are not up to par today. So we're going to give you that and have you have an understanding. We're going to do the vulnerability scanning. So we're going to be scanning and understanding what those vulnerabilities are to be able to communicate to you or to communicate to your internal or external IT company. That's totally okay. We can help keep them accountable. We're going to provide the phishing simulations. We're going to provide the training. We're going to provide the reporting. We're going to provide the take rate. One of the things that we've learned in this is not only about if you're doing it, what is your take rate that your company, that your organization is actually taking the training. I think that's really important, and there needs to be a level of accountability to have that understood, to know what's happening. So again, this is an ongoing process that's happening all the time. So it's not something that you just do one time and it's over. So we're going to fish quarterly. We're going to be able to give your dedicated compliance manager internally a report to help them understand what that looks like and who are the people that clicked on the wrong things that they shouldn't have, who actually took the training, and being able to hold your staff accountable. Typically what we're doing today is we're integrating this into an HR function inside of an organization to hold the people accountable. And as well as doing your annual penetration test. When we start doing penetration tests and really understand what your vulnerabilities are, that's really eye-opening. That's a way for you to hold your current vendor or internal IT staff accountable to have a true understanding. Look, things are going to happen. Things are going to change. Vendors change. Ports get opened. There's so many different things that happen throughout the year as an organization. This is going to be an ongoing thing for you that we can provide that reporting to have you have a true understanding of what to do. So we're not only going to give you the reporting, we're going to give you an understanding on how to fix that and what steps need to be taken in order to get there. Look, we've perfected this process with our internal customers today because, again, it's important to us to make sure that they don't get hacked, because the last thing that we want is them to get hacked. I see some people asking $35 per user. This is a monthly expense. Obviously, you can pay for this annually. So again, if you have 100 users, it's $3,500 a month. That's going to give you all of the things necessary that are needed. I've seen numbers all over the place in the market. I've seen people charging $24. I've seen people charging per rooftop. Look, I will tell you, I would be very cautious on what it looks like to be per rooftop, because those organizations cannot dedicate the staff and the understanding of what it's going to take to be able to maintain this and do this in the right way. Because it's not about just being in compliant. It's about making sure that the risk, and when it does happen, what you're going to do after. That's where we're bringing that next level of expertise. We're not just checking some boxes for you. We're providing some tools that are going to go into play that are going to help you. I've never been a big fan of gray areas when selling contracts and things to customers. That doesn't always work well for us, because sometimes we're a little more expensive than what you're currently paying to our current vendor. I just want to assure you that we have the staff, we have the capabilities to do this at a high level to make sure that we can help you. Kristen, we can bill it monthly, quarterly, annually. It doesn't really matter to us. Again, we do this today for government entities. We do this today in healthcare. We do this today in the automotive industry. So again, we just want to make sure that you're in a compliant place. And again, we have other packages that we can layer on top of this. Therefore, if you feel that there's some ways that we can help you, obviously from our perspective, we want to continue that relationship and help. But again, we work well with other organizations as well. We don't have to have all the components of this. And there are certain aspects that will even guide you that we shouldn't have all aspects of this to make sure that you're doing things in the right manner. So, you know, it's my job to make sure that what we're providing for our client base makes the most sense from a financial perspective to the organization, as well as back to us, that we want to make sure that we can still provide the high level of service that we know our clients are going to expect. We know we're not going to be a fit for everybody, and we're okay with that. But again, we obviously want you to choose us, and we hope that you do choose us to get there. That's why we're offering the gap assessment to kind of help you understand what that looks like and how to get there. So again, we're more than happy to do a call and understanding, myself, Trace, Taylor, anybody on our sales staff that can help you understand what this looks like and give you the full path of what it takes to get there. So again, I appreciate everyone getting on today. I want to leave some time to make sure we answer any questions. Again, you can scan this QR code to get a gap assessment. We have a call to action up top that you can schedule this now. I know we've done a few for some folks that were recently at the Priority RV function. And again, we're more than happy to help you and answer any questions that we can help. So, you know, if you got questions and you just want to understand, we're more than willing to start there as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate everybody's time today. I hope you learned something, and we look forward to talking to some folks in the future. So we're just open it up to any questions.
We did have a couple of questions come through earlier on, one from Victoria. So if we do the gap assessment, you're going to walk us through how to do all of these things?
So yeah, Victoria, that's a fair question. Basically, what a gap assessment is going to do is show you where you're at currently. That way, you know how much work you have to do, right? That's really the purpose. It's more of a discovery sort of assessment. Now, we can offer full control by control, like BCIO style services. That is something that we offer, but the free gap assessment is, and obviously during that gap assessment, if there's huge holes, we're going to give you some guidance, right? We're not just going to leave you hanging. It's not like a report that says, hey, you're red here. Good luck with that. You know, that's not the way we're going to do it. That's not the way I operate. That's not the way In-Telecom operates. I want you to have the knowledge to go out. And like Sean said, I hope we can partner with you and help when you do have gaps and you do identify those things. But really, it's more about building a baseline and understanding of which you really need to do anyway before you can begin to work on these compliance controls. So what we're going to do during the gap assessment is about 45 minutes. We're going to sit down, ask some questions about your baseline IT stack. What do you have? So, you know, once you schedule a gap assessment, make sure you have someone with you that's, if it's not you, that someone can answer those types of questions. You know, what are you using as a point of sale? That way we just have an idea of, okay, here's where you need to be and here's what it's going to take to get there. So we're not necessarily going to dig down into the specifics, but again, we do have 45 minutes and we're happy to answer any questions you have when we're doing that. So that's what you can expect on a gap assessment.
Yeah, it'll give you a good understanding of where you need to start and focus. And I think that's the main important is we can help you understand where you are. And if you want to take that gap assessment and hand it back to your IT vendor and say, hey, look at all these gaps, what are we going to do about it? If they can't answer that question to you, that's when you as the organization have to make a decision, or do you have the right provider? Do you have the right person in play that can do this? So how do we define a user? Anyone that has an email address. So if there's an email address that's associated with the user and they have access and information, that's there. We've worked with some recent dealerships that are looking at different ways to communicate to their staff because, again, they don't want to pay for a detail guy that never checks his email anyway, and they're using it for an internal communication piece. I think that's an important place to start looking and understand who utilizes it. So it's really going to be defined on the users you have internally with an email address. So if you have 100 email addresses, then again, your monthly bill is going to be $3,500 a month. So that'll kind of give you an understanding of what that looks like. So that's going to attach the tool to the user to give them the understanding on how we maintain and manage them.
We had a question from Bob. Trace, I believe this came in while you were talking. Please identify large versus small company, how many employees, and kind of where does that break down?
Absolutely. So the trick here is this is one of those gray areas. this one is very, very similar to HIPAA, and a lot, it's stated that you have to give it your best effort at your size. That's really the way it's worded. So we do have some wiggle room. We've worked with organizations, and I've worked with organizations in the past of all different sizes, right? And so these controls can be interpreted differently. That's where the sort of VCIO services come in, where we go control by control. And what we do is we say, okay, you have this in place, and maybe we can solve that with a policy, right? Maybe you don't have encryption just yet. You're not quite big enough to where we're going to deploy Active Directory and we're going to do these things. But what we can do is we can put a policy in place that says, do not store patient information on your machine. And then if they get caught, that policy has teeth. So you sort of have to adjust the controls. And then that's where those annual reviews come in. Oh, hey, we've doubled in size since last year. Now we have to look at, we can't just do this by policy anymore. We have to enforce it via disk encryption and some other things. So that's why those controls are written that way. They want to give you some wiggle room to grow and to sort this out. Like I said, the FTC, they're not unreasonable. They definitely want to come in and find something to fine you for. Don't get me wrong. That's what they're trained to do. They want to do that. But at the same time, they understand what you have as an organization. Maybe you don't have internet service providers out there where you're located. Maybe you only have one and it's not very good, right? Well, they're going to cut you some slack. There are going to be some things that you just physically can't do because of location and things like that. So it's not necessarily just size, it's capabilities and current standing as an org and what your best effort is on that. And again, we're happy to talk about that during the gap assessment. That's absolutely something we can look at and give you guidance on there, because it's not really cut and dry, more of just best effort. So that's a great question.
And taking into consideration, people that go hack systems don't look at size and scope. A lot of times what they're doing is they're just fishing for information using tools that are out there on the dark web. I would encourage, the thing to ask yourself as a business owner, in my opinion, is that how reliant am I on my systems to operate? So for instance, a good rule of thumb is if I turn off your internet, what does that look like for you to operate as an organization? Can you run a credit check? Most times, no. Can I send an email? No. Can I process a transaction through my credit card machine? No. Can I sell this RV? Can I service this RV? Can I service this automobile? A lot of the systems today that the techs are even using from the service side are all run through computers and technology. So can I do an alignment on a vehicle? Probably not. So again, that's some of the things to consider and look at is what am I going to tolerate in a sense of that if I shut this off, what is the true cost of operating as an organization? You have employees sitting there that can't work. You have upset customers that can't get their vehicle, their RV back. I mean, there's so many components that go into this. So really, yes, I think that compliance is an important piece, but I would more ask the question of what am I willing to risk in that, can I still operate as an organization? If you can, congratulations. You don't really need these things. I would continue to operate. Again, I'm a business owner. I would do the same thing. But again, from my perspective, it's important to me because everything that we do today is relying on technology. So if I can't service a customer, if I can't answer a phone, an email, a ticket, it's super stressful and critical to my organization. And it's how we generate the dollar. And that's what it really boils down to is look at that perspective. If your dealership was down for 11 days, 4 days, what's that true cost look like? And then after, what is the reputation that you've done? And it's such a small, minute amount of money for the amount of money that these organizations bring in. So it's kind of like you got to look at it like, would you put cameras up? Would you do a drug test on your employee? Would you do a background check on your employee? And I think some of that's going to play into the FTC and looking at who's really being negligent and looking at what they're doing versus who's actually doing things and following guidelines to at least try to be in compliance. Look, I've talked to some clients and they're like, look, this don't apply to me because I use CDK and they're in compliance. I wouldn't really agree with that because you got to be able to get the CDK somehow. And if I put ransomware in your machine and shut your dealership down, you're not going to be able to get the CDK. So it's not going to matter. Same thing with Reynolds and Reynolds, Dealer Track, all of them, IDS, you name it, we've worked with them. So,
all right, we have just a few minutes left, but I do have one real good question here from Sarah that I want to make sure we get answered. There's been a discrepancy from different compliance groups on what is considered non-public information. Where do you stand on the name, phone number, address question, especially when dealing with our vendors on what qualifies as an MPI?
That's a good one. Actually, I just got some insight into that one the other day. We were working with a cybersecurity insurance company, and the way they defined it is essentially anything that's public is not private, right? Like if you have my name and phone number written down, that's not private customer information. But if you have my name and that I came in looking to buy a specific model of RV, all of a sudden that becomes private, because now someone knows I've got the money to look at purchasing an RV. That's all it takes. My name with an RV. So if you've got a guest book up front, right, where, hey, when you come into our dealership, we want you to sign a guest book and maybe put what you're looking for today. That you can't do that anymore, right? I've seen dealerships that have these huge mats when people walk in, and it's kind of like, hey, you've come in and you've put your name on this mat, and all of a sudden you now have a breach, and that's what that's considered. So in this instance, it's basically public information like a name, a phone number, an address, along with either financial information, stuff like credit applications. I think the FTC now says if it's a credit application, even on a dead deal, like it came across the desk, they decided, you know what, I don't want this, and they walk out. What are you doing with that? Are you just putting it in the trash? Because that's not enough anymore. So it's really the combination of those two things: the customer identifying information, and then even something as simple as they were in here looking at blank. That all of a sudden is now customer information.
All right, thank you, Trace. I think that's all the questions we have. If anybody has anything else, please feel free to reach out to us privately. We'd be happy to talk to you. Just to confirm, we will be sending out copies of the presentation to everybody that attended, so you can have all the actual fine details from those individual slides on what compliance looks like. And again, just another reminder at the top of your screen there, you've got a little button that says schedule now. If you're interested in scheduling gap assessment with us, click on that, fill out the form there, and we'll get in touch with you to get that scheduled. Quick 45 minutes, we'll get you some answers and get you some guidance on what your next steps need to look like.
Thanks, y'all. Thank you very much. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, Trace.
Yeah, thank y'all.
Bye-bye.